when we all go back to the indigenous origin, to the indigenous shamans, we all have a contemplative origin that exists there. And they're telling it in the songs, in the rituals, and the storytellers, and in the dance. And that's the wisdom that will help free us from some of the confinements of the systems that we have today.
Meditating lately on how much fear is a part of life and how much trouble we get into when we become afraid of our own fear. I don't even know if that makes sense, but I know when I'm afraid, it's one thing. When I get afraid of my fear, then I go into panic, especially if there's this, I shouldn't be afraid right now. What am I doing wrong?
You know, happiness seems to be such a state of being a reaction to something.
Yep.
But joy is something that is from within. It's that center. When Howard Thurman talks about how we center down and how there's this inner island, this sea, and in front of that is this flaming sword. And I imagine that the energy of our joy, the radiance of our joy, is there in that inward sea.
Friends, about 2 years ago, I started having dreams. I'm a dreamer, but the frequency with which I was having intense dreams and remembering them more than tripled. They weren't scary dreams. They weren't troubling dreams. They were dreams where people in my life who had deceased were showing up to talk to me. My mother, my brother, my grandfather, a mentor here, a mentor there, a teacher. More dead folks showed up in my dreams in the span of 1 year than in my previous 46 years put together. So I turned to a teacher of mine, Dr. Barbara Holmes, and asked her what she thought. Dr. B is an extraordinary human being, possibly one of the wisest and most brilliant and most authentic humans I've ever met, and certainly one of the most genuine mystics I've ever encountered. Dr. B was my teacher. It was my great privilege to work with her, and much to my surprise, she took it upon herself to become a friend and a mentor. Professionally, Dr. B is a scholar of African American spirituality and mysticism, even as she was a living embodiment of it. Her teaching revealed and reveals how the cosmos can expand our limited constructs of religion, race, and power. She teaches about how communal spirituality can inspire imagination, wisdom, and healing, especially in times of crisis. How often, when we experience wounds that are too big for any one individual to carry, we respond by coming together in communal spiritual practice, what she calls crisis contemplation. To bring us into this wisdom, her teachings especially draw on the insights of BIPOC and Indigenous folks to expand our understandings of what contemplation is, to remind us of the importance of our ancestors. And as I always like to say, she rebaptized me into an understanding of what it means to live in a crowded cosmos where everything is alive and everything is a teacher. She's the author of so many good books, including Race in the Cosmos, Joy Unspeakable, The Contemplative Practices of the Black Church, Crisis Contemplation, and my personal favorite, Dreaming. You can listen to her still living teachings on several seasons of her amazing podcast, The Cosmic We, with her brilliant co-host, Donnie Bryant. When I asked Dr. B about the dreams that I kept having of folks who had passed beyond the veil, as she would say, past this life in the way that we typically conceive of it, my many, many beloved friends and family who'd passed through death and then somehow still become living presences in my life. Dr. B said, well, this means one of two things. You're either about to die, which was a little scary, but she said, but I don't think it's that. Something is coming in your life when you're going to want to listen so deeply to these ancestors and guides who are still with you. So listen to them, she told me. Never would I have guessed when she told me that just a year later, she herself would also pass through the veil and become one of those spiritual guides who spoke to me from the other side of whatever comes after this life as we conceive of it. Dr. B passed away on the 15th of October, 2024, 1 year ago. On this 1 year anniversary of her passing, thank you so much for joining me on the Healer with a Thousand Faces podcast as we celebrate the wisdom that she passed on. To do so, I'm joined today by another friend and teacher of mine, Felicia Murrell. Felicia is also a deep student of Dr. Barbara Holmes' work, but a brilliant teacher in her own right. She's an author, she's a spiritual companion, she's a speaker, she's a certified master life coach. She has over 20 years of experience leading spiritual communities. And she has a very, very deep and compassionate understanding of what it means to be human and what it means to be a healing human on our journey. She's dedicated to empowering individuals to embrace who they already are and who love is inviting them to be. In this podcast, we explore this idea that our wounds set us out on our wandering, that they give us our wondering, the questions that we ask and answer, and eventually they lead us to our wisdom. We find that the pain that we can feel is very often the pain that we can heal, and the medicine that we seek is the medicine that's ours to give. And in the end, our wounds lead us to our work. And in that, I think our wonder. Felicia talks about this in her book, And the Restorative Power of Love in an Either or World, which is a well marked up favorite of mine, because Felicia talks about the healing power of love as that other force, and the bigger one, I'm sure, that calls us through our wonderings and our wanderings to our wisdom and our work. I'm so excited for you to meet Felicia. In the first third of this episode, we talk about her wisdom and her work and how her wounds have led her through and to the medicine that she shares with the world. And then in the bottom 2/3 of the episode, Felicia and I turn to invite you into our great love and appreciation of Dr. Barbara Holmes. Thank you for joining me today to have this fantastic conversation with a friend and to celebrate this teacher who is such a precious gift in my life and who continues to be, because my goodness, has she shown up in my dreams with quite a lot of advice in the last year. I hope you hear something in this episode that offers wisdom to you and wherever you are in the wonderful and winding path that is leading you deeper and deeper into your own wisdom and work in the world. Thanks, friends, for joining me again for the Healer with a Thousand Faces podcast. Felicia, thank you so much for making time for this conversation. I'm so excited.
I am excited as well. Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
I am so thrilled. Felicia Murrell is my friend, colleague, teacher, and one of my favorite conversation partners and author of the absolute masterpiece And the Restorative Power of Love in an Either or World. And you can see my copy is marked up. That's a well-loved book, is when I have flags and underlines and everything else. We're here today to talk about a beloved shared teacher of ours. But before we get into that, we have to talk about you. Origin says this life is a classroom and a hospital. And I feel that when I read this book. It's so rich and it's so beautiful. I have to ask, what led you to write this?
Thank you for reading it, first of all, and then for the question. And honestly, I think I was led to write it really as an invitation. I often write to empty my insides, but I was at a place in my journey. We're going to talk about Dr. B. Dr. B, I was looking for a teacher. I was looking for a teacher that had roots in Christianity, but had a real expansive faith, had expansive space for faith and mystery and meaning. And this is actually pre-Dr. B. So a lot of this came in looking for person or persons of that kind that could tell me I wasn't crazy with what I was thinking and all of that. And what ended up coming to me was not in flesh and blood, like, I'm going to be your teacher. It was an invitation from spirit that you're on a journey, and so are a lot of other people. And there are going to be other women, other Black women, other humans out in the world at some point, years from now, days from now, months from now, that are also on a similar journey. And they're having some similar thoughts. They're wondering some things. They have questions. They're looking for places to wander without necessarily resolution or answers, but that relatability. And so the invitation felt to put down in writing, kind of like, I won't say a map, but really like I'm just dropping little pebbles along the way that someone else, as they're journeying, might see a pebble and like, oh, that's a fellow sojourner. And so that's really what led to the writing of this.
Oh, well, I'm so glad it did. I've appreciated this book so much. It's a kick in the ass and a warm hug at the same time. It's just so. It makes sense, right? For a book called "And" to be both of those things. One of the ideas that we're exploring in this podcast, it's called "The Healer with a Thousand Faces," is that our experiences of wonder, but also our wounds, set us out on our wandering. And they give us our wondering. They give us the questions that we ask and answer. And so your wounds are different than mine. Your wandering is different than mine, and your wondering is different than mine. And I can see that. Like I love how you write this book because you open it with some personal reflections. You share those wounds with us. I think on page 26, when you say, "As a child of the South, I lived in the fear that reverberated from my family's muscle memory. A family that ordered my coming and going, a fear that ordered my coming and going, my way to be in the world, demanding that I be small, invisible, that I shrink myself to the tiniest possible existence so I wouldn't be next, the next one to die, the next one to be raped or maimed." That's so powerful. How can you share just a little bit more about how you think your personal unique wounds to your story led to your wandering and the wondering that asked you to write this book?
Yeah. And I think it's also a wrestle that continues forever because in the wandering and sitting with the muscle memory of my family and the way that we were, I realized that we only have the capacity that we have, right?
Yeah.
And so within that, this was a way to keep all of us safe, to keep us from horrific experiences. But what happens inside of that, when you are a child experiencing that, when you are a teen experiencing that, you create a whole narrative, or you learn a way to move and exist in the world that is small, where you don't take up space, where you kind of hide and you are invisible. And so imagine to be moving into adulthood as a woman where you're still trying to shrink and be invisible. And yet spirit is offering you an invitation to let your light shine before men, right? To not hide your pearl under a basket. And you're still in that wrestle. And so this is the reclamation of acknowledging this is where I came from and this is what I started. And this is spirit showing me how that is to be, and then what can be when I take my hand and put it in spirit's hand. Again, Dr. V, right? She always talked
Yeah.
about how we lived in this liminal space between spirit's leading and our free will, yes. And that feels right there because every yes that I make is I am reclaiming for my family that the days that we had to live small, that when I can say yes, when I can freely allow that light to shine, it is taking up the space that my family had to shrink into for their own safety. So it's not just a yes for me, it's also healing of a generational line inside of that lineage. Yeah.
I so appreciate that. And it's something that I've learned in recording these conversations with so many teachers is that our healing isn't just for us.
Yes.
That's so powerful. What I also love about your story and the way you write this book is the way that it shows me the connection between the particular and the universal. So that is, you're sharing your story and you're doing your healing on behalf of your family. And you as a Black woman are letting your light shine before men unashamedly. And that's so powerful. And I learned so much from the particularities of your story. And then you share insights into healing that I think everyone can relate to. I look at, one of my favorite passages is on page 111. And if you, I would invite you, read as much of that as you want to. I just love that one so much because I think you're writing something here that everyone can relate to.
I'm so glad this resonated with you. This is actually one of my favorite passages as well. This actually came out of sitting in a practice called bio-spiritual focusing, where you're kind of sitting with your own self and the felt sense and that. It says, "Why cast down, dear soul, and why are you disquieted within me? Why is your breath short, your lungs constricted? Dear soul, I feel the pain of your anguish and the sensations of my body. I feel your restlessness, the desire for the dark night to end and day to break forth. Dear soul, I feel your yearning, your angst, and how normalcy feels like the place we should return to. But this is the thing about journeying, dear soul. The dark night of liminality is more womb than tomb, a birthing canal, an invitation to cross the threshold of what was into the light of a new day, a new beginning. This is not a reconstructed reset of a regurgitated past experience. No, dear soul, the womb of the dark night is a space where life is held, where seeds are nourished, kept safe in their gestation. Without connection, wombs cannot exist. And I know, dear soul, this time has seemed like one of bleak, utter loneliness, the antithesis of connection. But in the womb, life flows from the host, connected and held together by a cord. Life passing to life. And sometimes that is all that binds us to one another and to life itself. And it too, this thread of the master weaver, this thread of love is enough.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love this so much. And I have to tell you, like, it's beautiful when the synchronicities break in. I was feeling really overwhelmed with life and the world and everything the other night. And I did a meditation in the middle of the night and I was just sitting and the word enough came to me. Yes. And I had this deep sense that I need to meditate on what it means to be enough, right? Or that there is enough, or that enough exists. And that's so powerful. God, I love this one. I hope everyone reads this book if they haven't already. It's so comforting and also instructing at the same time. And it reminds me in the connection between the uniqueness of your journey, right? You've gone on your own healing journey. You've found the medicine that is yours to give to the world. How it connects to everyone. I remember, we'll talk about Dr. B in a second, but one of my favorite things she said to me once upon a time, we were talking about the path of descent, these hard moments that we go through, where we're literally saying, why so downcast, oh my soul? Why cast down, dear soul? And she said something that I'd never thought about. She said, this is a crowded path, the path of descent. Almost every human has experienced it at some point in their life. And so to realize that when we feel alone, yes, we're having an experience that almost everyone has experienced. And we might actually be never less alone than when we feel alone. Does that make sense? I feel that in your words.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And even in that passage, it goes on to talk about how scarcity would have us believe differently. And I think so much you were talking about this word enough, right? And so many times we're doing the comparison, whether consciously or unconscious. I am the only one. I am here. I'm more than, I'm less than, or I'm not enough, or I am alone. And we have this feeling that it's only me, right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
the thing about a universal kind of love and a universal
Yes.
suffering is that it's exactly what you said, Mike. Every single person has been touched in some ways by love and some ways by loss. And when we
Yeah.
stop to think about our interconnectedness, this unbroken wholeness, that every human being alive on the planet at some point has or will be touched by that. And
Yeah.
I may feel lonely, but I'm not alone, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It helps me think about how Father Richard Rohr, who we've both studied with, says that the two great paths, or I like to think of as the two great crowbars that come
Yeah,
into our life to break things up, are great love and great suffering. Um, and I think if you spend enough time with either one, you realize how connected they really are, right?
yeah,
There's no love without loss, and there's no loss that's not pointing us to something we love
yeah,
and the opportunity to love everyone else who's experienced it, which is everyone.
yeah.
Oh,
I was talking to
it,
a friend yesterday, and we were talking about love as fire. I people
ooh,
talk about love, and some people have a lot of difficulty with it. I'm not one of those, but I
yeah,
understand that love is the force of the whole universe. I understand love
yeah,
is energy, and also just this idea of love as fire. And I was
yeah,
saying to my friend, fire warms, yes, but fire also burns. And so when
yes,
we think of love as fire,
yeah, yeah,
that love is burning away everything that opposes love's kind. In the biblical narrative, it would be the wood, stubble, and hay, right?
yeah,
That's what gets burned
yeah,
up. And what remains is what's pure. That's of love's kind, right?
yeah,
But what we don't realize is that how we get burned in fire is our attachment to something. When we are
yeah,
clinging to something
yeah,
that's being burned and we hold on to it too long,
yeah,
then we get caught in that, the
yeah,
alchemical process that is taking place. And this is part of that invitation to hold things loosely as
yeah,
well. Um,
yeah,
and so we get to sit with the both and again,
yeah,
the and of both the suffering and the love, both the love and the loss, both
yeah,
the holding and the letting go inside of that process of love. And it is both, a kick in the ass
yeah,
and a warm hug. It's
yeah,
it's both of
yeah.
those things too. But
It's so
I
true.
think it's important to hold that picture.
I love that, and I appreciate it. I grew up. I'm in New Mexico right now. We're in the middle of the summer. It feels like it's hotter than the surface of the sun. But I grew up on the East Coast, so I grew up in snowy weather in the wintertime. And I think a lot about how some of the mystics that I like, writing like 1700 years ago, talked about the work of love on the soul like thawing an iceberg, right? The soul is frozen and love is slowly thawing us out. And that's a process because it there's an alchemy, and also there's some scary stuff in the ice, and there's a lot of treasure in there too. But love hurts sometimes. And I say all that to say I remember being outside playing when I was a kid, or shoveling, or building a snowman, or having a snowball fight. And I remember I would come inside and my hands would be completely numb, and I would put them underwater, and the water didn't have to be anything more than lukewarm to feel like needles on my skin as the feeling was coming back. And I feel like that's how love works on the soul sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I've been sitting with this image because water really speaks to me. I probably was a mermaid in another life or will be.
That's great.
Um, but I've been sitting with how even the idea of the flow of love and thinking about
Yeah.
water like a river. But then other times I think about a rushing waterfall. And under a really like gushing, rushing waterfall,
Yeah.
that water, or literally water coming out of a fire hose, that water can take your skin off.
Oh my
The
gosh.
same water, the same
Yeah.
element, but how
Yeah.
it can be so gentle and then how it can be so fierce. And
Yeah.
so I've been sitting with this because I've been asking spirit about the tension, the contradiction, the paradox between something that is for our wholeness, but that also might hurt. Just even the language of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like our beloved Dr. B, I don't have answers. I just have considerations.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
but it's something that I wonder about it because I know I'm looking at I have this belief right now that love is good and only good. And I
Yeah.
know that love is drawing me towards good and
Yeah.
um, toward a wholeness that radiates beauty,
Yeah.
truth, and goodness and towards light.
Yeah.
And also, I know this process of softening can come with some resistance and some
Yeah.
agitation
Oh my
and,
gosh.
you know,
Yes.
some things that need some balm or some salve
Yeah.
applied to it. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to hold the both and
Yeah.
be in conversation with spirit about the language about that and how love shows up for me in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wise words for someone who gives us the wisdom of the and I appreciate that because it's it hurts to love. Really, that's it. Jung says that so much of our life is it's not about getting rid of suffering; it's suffering for the right things.
That's right.
Right? He says legitimate suffering is easier to bear. He says, and that feels like it.
Yeah.
Before we talked
It's
about
such a
Dr.
risk.
B.
It's
Oh,
such a
it's
risk.
it's such a risk, and there's so much. I'll say this, and then we'll get to Dr. B in a second. But
Okay.
I feel like I've been meditating on this lately too. How much fear is a part of love, and and I think people are so afraid of fear that even some of my favorite spiritual teachers and mystics never get around to talking about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like I hear that in what you're saying. It is such a risk. There is no love without
Yeah.
fear, is there?
Yeah. I have there's a piece in And that I wrote and it talks about how love is whole, love has no opposite.
Yeah.
Um, and what I realized in the death of both of my parents have passed away, so I'm not sure if it was with dad or with mom, but that love could hold even my fear, right? And so many people try to say that like love is the opposite of fear, or fear is the opposite of love. But I learned in that moment that I love could hold my fear. Like it was okay to be
Yeah.
afraid. I'm holding that with one and the wholeness of love as the source of all being, as
Yeah.
as every energy resides in love, including
Yeah.
that, right? That love could sustain and hold
Yeah.
hold that fear. I'm also thinking about predators that are mamas, and a lot of times in animal that is a mom, like a mama bear, right? This mama bear won't necessarily, and maybe bear is the wrong one, maybe it's a different animal, but won't necessarily attack unless you attack their cub or unless they're feeling unsafe. The other thing that arouses the instinct of a predator animal is the smell of fear.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
smell of fear. And I've been
Yeah.
sitting with love, really sitting with spirit inside of this because what I sense in our own atmosphere these days is an heightened smell of fear,
Yes. 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 Yes.
and it
And
makes me
I
wonder.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm gonna meditate on that. Thank you for because one of the things I need to realize, I'm realizing this as you're saying this, is there's a trauma conditioned part of me that like that animal is triggered by the smell of fear, including my own.
Yeah,
Right. I've been meditating lately on how much fear is a part of life and how much trouble we get into when we become afraid of our own fear. I don't even know if that makes sense,
yeah,
but I know when I'm afraid, it's one thing. When I get afraid of my fear,
yeah,
then I go into panic, especially if there's this, oh, I shouldn't be afraid right now. What am I doing wrong?
yeah.
I,
So I
I, and
have
I,
this story. I had something happen to me in my childhood, and I won't go into it or name it, but it was really horrific to the fact that the trauma of that experience still lives within me today. And it's so that it's hard for me to even name the thing that creates that. I mean, it is a debilitating fear.
Yeah.
It's the worst ever. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's
Yeah.
very bad. And
Yeah.
so in 2022, our oldest daughter got married in a destination wedding. And I happened to go down to the beach 5 o'clock in the morning to have my sit.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm down there sitting, I'm looking out at the waves and I open my eyes and I happen to look to my right or sorry, I look left and someone is coming down the beach and my mind spins a story because it looks like they have with them this thing that is debilitating to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I freeze and I feel it all over my body and I go
Mm-hmm.
into this panic. So when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about being afraid of your own fear, but no one else is there to help me or rescue me, and I don't know what to do. I just know that if I keep sitting there, it could be the worst thing ever. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm too frozen in fear to
Mm-hmm.
move. And I am definitely afraid at this point. And I start crying. I'm literally crying
Mm-hmm.
because I'm frozen in my own fear. And so I watch the waves, and the waves start really like calming me enough to bring some rational clarity to like, you could do this, you could do this, just maybe avert your eyes, like, okay. And so I feel like I'm supposed to sit there and then just kind of avert my eyes. So that's what I
Mm-hmm.
do. So the person walks past, I avert my eyes. And when I know that they're past, I feel this invitation from spirit to look, which I normally would not do,
Mm-hmm.
but I was trusting enough to actually look. And Mike, it was a backpack.
Mm.
The person had a backpack,
Mm.
but I'd seen something that reminded me of something, and my
Yeah.
body went back into the 4-year old, the
Yeah.
6-year old, the 8-year old, the 12-year
Yeah.
year old that had experienced this trauma that leaves her in a debilitative state to this
Yeah.
day, and
Yeah.
had created a whole narrative, sobbing everything, total reaction out of something that was not true.
Mm-hmm.
But the fear of it, my fear of my fear, it
Yes.
created a whole
Ah.
narrative. Now
Yeah.
imagine when we get a whole collective society of people that are afraid of their own fear and they're
Mm.
trapped in a narrative, and the sound of fear is so loud that they
Mm.
can't hear anything rational.
Mm.
And it was literally the move of the
Mm.
waves
Mm.
out in. It was the voice of spirit on those waves that
Yeah.
called me back to my own being, back to some sense of sanity. And then when the person passed, what they had was a backpack.
Yeah.
And I could not I was relieved, of course, but I had to, it was a moment to learn a
Yeah.
lesson, right? To sit with that. But also I felt like it was one of those invitations to model what we see when you talk about particularities that lead to universal things. It was a particular wounded experience for me that
Yeah.
exists, but it also opened a way to a universal healing,
Yes.
right? Because it's
Yeah.
something that we all can learn from and grow from.
And it's such a brilliant example of putting your wounds
Yeah.
in the service of healing the world and turning them into wisdom, because yes, that's something that so many of us can relate to.
Yeah.
That moment where I'm reliving a fear story, I'm afraid of my own fear, I'm going into paralysis, I'm going into freeze, or I'm going into fight. And we live in a world that makes money by triggering our fear over and over and over again. Like
Over and
keeping
over.
us, cell phones and social media and all these things work by keeping us in a state of hyper arousal. So we're clicking and reacting all the time. And I so appreciate that, the invitation to sit with that story and pause, listen to my own fear, but also listen to the sound of the waves. Right? We'll talk. We might get around to Howard Thurman and the sound of the genuine, and to
Yes.
tune back in
Yes.
to the rhythm and the sound of love.
Yeah.
and safety. That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. I love it. I have to ask if you don't mind, just for one more, and then we'll talk about our beloved teacher. I love page 270. Could I be selfish and ask you to read one more?
I love that. The back of the
Yeah.
book is actually like my favorite part of this whole
Oh,
book.
it's so
And so
good.
I always secretly hope people like
Yeah,
get to the back of the book.
it's so good. It's so good.
Unveiled or hidden, love is always there. In the hell of our deepest despair, in the high of our greatest joy, love is there. In the absence of correctly phrased theology and the presence of misinformation, love is there. In strokes of genius and brilliant creativity, love is there. In heartbreak and ecstatic union, love is there. I may say in and you say the, distinctions that rankle with the possibility of confusion. Still, love is there. I may bemoan the twists and turns of your journey, critique the way you're getting it wrong. Still, love is there. Do I trust love with you the way I trust love with me? Unveiled or hidden, do I believe love faithful enough to bring into alignment all that is misconstrued? Do I trust love to make whole that which is broken, or do I remain hell bent on helping it all along?
So good. So good. And I think that last little, I mean, the whole thing, and that do I trust love to make whole that which is broken, or do I remain hell bent on helping it all along, is so relevant to what you're talking about healing. We can choose to just keep reliving our old narratives and make them more real in the world, or with great effort
Yeah.
and struggle, we could choose to trust love.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for writing this book.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
putting it out in the world. I appreciate it. So much wisdom. And I love this. You really have so much gifted us with putting your healing in the service of healing the world.
Thank you.
And if our wounds lead us to our wandering and our wondering, they help us find our wisdom. And I think they help us find our wisdom teachers too. And that's the other thing that you and I get to talk about today is this beautiful and beloved teacher who we both share a connection with, who transitioned on to become an ancestor in the fall of last year, and who you've taught about, and I've gotten to help support in her teaching in her life. And oh my gosh, I can't say enough about how excited I am, especially with you, to get to talk about our beloved teacher, Dr. Barbara Holmes, who, goodness gracious, is amazing. I'd love for you to go first. How did you first encounter Dr. B? And how all do you experience her? What place does she hold in your universe of wisdom teachers? Who is she to you?
Oh my gracious. A patron saint. I first encountered Dr. B actually through her writing. And it was through, I think Joy Unspeakable was the first of her books that I picked up. I I'll get there in a minute, but I think
Yeah.
Joy Unspeakable was the first book that I picked up. I had not actually encountered her being, and my life was reordered and changed, upended in a better way when I encountered her being. And that actually happened when I was a student at the Living School. And so when I was going through Living School, and we had our first initial symposium, and we got to meet Dr. B. And when Dr. B introduced herself and started telling of her history, she is from a descendant of South Carolina. I am from North Carolina. She is of West African descent. I am as well. She was, formed in Pentecostal spaces. I was as well. I mean, there are so many parallels. And in the Gullah Geechee community, there's so much connection to the land and herbs and medicine and the shamans. And her family in Gullah Geechee communities, that's just a part of culture. Like that's, and in my family, we also had medicine men and healers and that, but it wasn't a part of an accepted part of our culture. And so it was quiet and it was something you didn't talk about. And I was the kid that, again, from really 4 years old, my early memory, I had thin veil experiences, right? And when I would, as a kid, blurt things out to the grown-ups or say I saw, whatever, I would get, again, tamped down, this small space. And in our churches, it was those people who were dealing in our community, we would say they were working the roots. If they were root workers, they were considered demonic. That was a demonic practice. And so the first time that I heard Dr. B speak, I won't ever forget it because I just listened to her and I had tears coming down my face. Like literally my shirt was wet because here was a lady that clearly was rooted in her Christian faith and also clearly rooted in the practices of her ancestry and her heritage. And they were not in opposition to one another. They were supporting one another and sitting together. And that, when I say that I was looking for mentors, that was what I was looking for. I was looking for someone to tell me that the road that Spirit was inviting me on, I had permission to travel. And I feel like she gave me that permission to journey along a road that really I'd already been on for so long, but we weren't allowed, if you will, in those spaces to travel them. So that's how I encountered her. And that's, yeah.
So good.
What about you?
Oh my gosh. I encountered her in the living school. She was such a force of nature and spirit when she showed up. I watched this teaching. They sent a team down to her in her home, and she'd done a teaching from her home and talked about. We saw videos of her fishing and her talking about predominantly joy unspeakable, the contemplative practice of the Black Church, and it hit me really, really deep. I grew up in a very, very large Pentecostal church, and we were there till I was about 11. And just to give context, I remember when I was 12 years old, we moved to Pennsylvania. I went to school the first day I came home, and I said to my mom, I didn't know there were this many white people in the whole world. Because that was my Pentecostal church, and the area that I grew up in New Jersey and the New York City area was not like that. So I had moved on also from Pentecostal Christianity and deconstructed it pretty heavily. I'd gone in a lot of other places, and Dr. B put me back in touch with that in a way that was really initially very unsettling, and then become very, very meaningful for me as we would talk, and we might get into that in our conversation. And then I ended up working for the center. And so Dr. B needed support on something, and I'd gotten hired, and they're like, you're going to work with Dr. B, and I was so nervous. And we got on our very first call one-on-one, and she looked at me and said, I'm so glad you're here. I love your mind so much. I'm so glad to be working with a person of intelligence. And this is no shade on anyone else. She was talking about me. And this is one of my favorite things. She goes, I'm not a fan of what I like to call dumbness. So she's like, I'm so glad you're here. And she never stopped being that voice in my life. I got to support her on so many different projects. And we would collaborate together, and I learned so much from working with her and her teaching. But then she would always get me, like in the last 5 minutes of our meetings, she'd go, how you doing? And I would, I'm doing okay, I'm this. And then she would always hit me with some unasked for piece of advice, and it would smack me right between the eyes. And I remember eventually going back and going, Dr. B, you remember when you said that thing to me? And she'd go, no. And I go, well, it sounded like it was so right on the money. And it sounded like you knew things about my life that I hadn't told you. And she'd go, oh, when I'm doing my shaman thing or the spirit speaking, I just talk. And she goes, and sometimes I hear myself and I go, Barbara, what are you doing? But she goes, I just got to say it. And I remember, I'll say more about like who she was, but I remember her telling me one time, I said something very academic, and she said, you don't forget your connection to the spirit. She said, you've met real prophets and you know it's real. And she told me one time, a prophet is someone who truly sees you, and they'll tell you where you've been and what you had for breakfast. And she wasn't talking about herself, but she was talking about herself to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was extraordinary. And so I know her as an ethicist and an activist and an author and an intellectual and a teacher and, all these fantastic, and a scholar, and also maybe the most genuine mystic I've ever met. Goodness gracious, what a gift.
Yeah. It was the mysticism, right? Like, because the thing that I loved is that she wasn't trying to call herself a mystic.
Nope.
But you knew that this woman has spent time in the presence and of ancestors, of spirit beings, of God, that she carried a wisdom that, yes, was from the time she put in academics, for sure. I will never take that away, because such a brilliant intellectual, right?
Sure.
And also a wisdom that came from the knowing of being. And one of the things that, really touched me is when she talked about how she had taught everybody else's wisdom and everybody else's expertise. And then she finally felt like she had gotten free enough to teach what the ancestors were telling her.
That's so good.
And I'd always been a person, when I encounter the world, I get really full up of the world, if that makes sense. Like I take in the energies, I feel it, very deeply. And it can be heavy and weighty. I'm a Virgo, so I'm an earth sign anyway. So the heavy part of the earth is there. And one of the things that spirit taught me before I even knew it was spirit or whatever was that the land would pray with me. The land would help me.
Yeah.
But really the words were, the land would help me bear the weight. And so Dr. B was my first person where I could share that and then not feel like, oh my gosh, you're woo-woo and they're going to lock you up for the things that you're sharing. But I was telling her how when I get that way, really I have this intuitive thing to go out and put my hand down on the ground and to pray into the earth, but to when I say pray, literally just open my mouth and yawn so the things that I had ingested could come out, and that the earth would bear the weight of those cares with me, right?
Yeah.
And she's just nodding and smiling at me, like I had said, I had chocolate milk for breakfast, and I'm just thinking I'm so getting ready to be judged for something crazy, and she never even said anything more. And then later, I was reading Crisis Contemplation, I think it was. And she tells the story of an indigenous elder in there, and about them going out and being with the land and this mothering energy or mothering power of the land. And I was like, I hadn't said anything to that woman that was weird at all, and in fact, in her own writing, she had, shown where this is an indigenous practice that has existed. So I love that.
It's so good, and I want to come back to that in a minute, because that to me also, I always say that, I'm going to say more about this in a second. Dr. B reintroduced me to living in a crowded cosmos. Yeah. I had been living in a beautiful but somewhat sterile world. I had confused contemplation with dissociation, which is a conversation for another day.
Ooh, yes,
Dr. B, Dr. B got me back into a crowded cosmos. And I used to tell her that, and she'd go, don't give that to me. You need to write a book, and you need to use that title because those are good words. Don't attribute them to me. They're yours. And I was like, well, if I write the book, it would be about how you taught me to live in a crowded cosmos.
This was Dr. B when I was doing my teaching. When I was doing my teaching, I almost had that in my thing, and I literally felt her go, no, 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 no. And so I took that out of my teaching mic, and I was like, oh, she's right there, like staring over my
Yeah.
shoulder as I'm typing this.
Yeah.
Like I was like, no, 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 no,
She's
no.
so good. Oh, I love it. She's so good. And to anyone listening who isn't familiar with her work, I cannot recommend it enough. There's so many good books: Liberation in the Cosmos, Race in the Cosmos. If you can find her book on dreaming, it's amazing. The book I think she's most famous for is Joy Unspeakable. And I'd love to ask you about that in a second. But Dr. B could do it all. She taught Joy Unspeakable, which is a contemplative practice of the Black Church. She could introduce white folks and everyone in the world to these gorgeous practices. She could help BIPOC folks go deeper. She, in a conversation that needed to hear it, right? Dr. B showed up and said, there is a culturally normative understanding of what contemplative practice is, which is one person sitting still on a mat. And that is one way to do contemplation. Yeah. But there are so many other ways to do it. And she started with the contemplative practice of the Black Church and then expanded to indigenous cultures the world over. But let's start there. Joy Unspeakable. What does that book mean to you? And if you could elevate or pitch the wisdom of it, what would you say that it is?
That's a really great question. I think for me, I'm going to say that Joy Unspeakable was a coming home. And the reason why I say that is because having grown up in a Pentecostal setting, and you also know because you've been in Pentecostal church, I would have never named that moment a contemplative moment. So it felt like a coming home. And I'm gonna actually, say that for your listeners as well. But there's this moment in Pentecostal worship where the church that Doug and I attended in Nashville, it had a lot of our choir members were also gig musicians, right? And so they're playing for country music stars, they're playing for gospel musicians. CeCe Winans was in our church before she started her own, so this is the caliber of music. So any Sunday morning was like a whole gospel production. Mm-hmm. So you have this high praise, high praise, high praise. Everybody's getting their shout on, similar to the ring shouts in the Gullah Geechee culture. And so you have this high praise. And all of a sudden, there's this moment when you're in high praise, and I actually just felt the Spirit, and it's a holy hush. Thurman would say it's like the hush arbors, right? A holy hush descends, and there is a place of calm, a place of recognition of the presence of Spirit, that the whole community sustains and hold. Imagine somebody playing a piano or playing an organ and holding that C, right? And it's just this one sustained, the silence is a sustained sound.
Yeah.
And there in the presence of that is such a contemplative moment. And that's the coming home that Dr. B was offering in Joy Unspeakable.
Yeah.
And what she was saying was, it's not just the silence itself. One is the community, but also that delayed kind of existence that happens right in the middle of that, where time loses time inside of that. And I felt a coming of home in that. So that's one. And then even as she furthers in Joy Unspeakable, and she brings it to Black Lives Matter, she brings it to Kendrick and the hip hop, and she starts showing all of these different ways of contemplation. That's not just like this. And so for me, the book really did feel like a coming home. It is very marked. I will honestly say that her book that probably upends me the most is Race in the Cosmos. And partly because she wrote the first edition of that book in 2002. And I just am blown away when I think about, and I should say she published the book in 2002.
Yeah.
Because as a writer, you know that you write for a year, year and a half, sometimes 2 years, sometimes more before
Yeah.
something gets published. So, so that meant even before the turn of the century or at the turn of
Yeah.
the century, she is sitting in these thoughts. And these thoughts that you and I both know are not just about, the ancestors in her own African diaspora, but the contemplative portion in every indigenous ancestry and every heritage. That's some pioneer, groundbreaking type
Oh,
thoughts. I mean, that wisdom didn't just come from, like, that's a gift of some ancestral whispers and some spirit gleanings and all of that. So that's profound to me. When I read that book, I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, because I and I think it's in that book in particular where she says we're interconnected, not just spiritually or metaphorically, but actually.
yeah.
That's a hard ask in today's times,
It is.
right?
Yeah.
That you, and to use Valerie Carr's language, you are a part of me that I do not yet know. But
Yeah.
but I'm not just talking about human beings, because human beings have this idea that we're superior to every other ecosystem.
Yeah.
But I'm also connected to the cow, and I'm connected to the flower, and I'm connected to the tree, and
Yeah.
all these things are also a part of me. I'm
Yeah.
not just over them to dominate it. So that joy unspeakable is a coming home. Race in the Cosmos upended me.
I
I
love
have
it
to
so
ask, what
much.
about you?
I think lately it's dreaming because someone gave me a copy after she passed away without realizing that it was a signed copy. So when I opened it, and in her handwriting in the front was "Let the dreamers lead, for they've seen the future." Dr. B. That one hits me, but I think the one that gets me the most is Crisis Contemplation, which is just a little book that she published here through the CAC, because she taught me so much in that book, but she taught me two things that changed the game for me, which is, first of all, realizing that I had always viewed contemplation as a journey inward, and it is, and as a solitary action, and it is. But the crisis contemplation, two big insights. One, sometimes contemplation is a response to trauma and suffering, and there's a lot. And some trauma and some suffering is too big to be carried by the individual, and you need the community to carry it with you.
Yeah.
And she's saying BIPOC folks who are part of traumatized communities, they have an insight into this. There's a key here that you can't carry some suffering alone. It's too big, right? And I think the only thing that lets us carry trauma with a capital T is love and community, because they're the only two things that are bigger than the trauma, which is something else your book taught me. The other thing that Dr. B showed me is that contemplation is connection. It's going inward to get outward. She turned it inside out for me. I started to see, like, I get alone to learn how to connect. I close my eyes to learn how to see. I stop my ears to learn how to hear. I close my mouth to learn how to speak. I still my body to learn how to take action. Once again, I step away to learn how to be in community. And that is being baptized into a crowded cosmos.
Yes.
And I had come from this very stoic, I'm on my hero journey, and I'm going out alone to do my great work. And what a shitty way to live, pardon my language. She showed me it's so much more than that. Dr. B turned everything upside down for me.
Yeah.
Here's a few fun questions for you. One of the things that she taught me was to slow down. That to be productive and to do sustainable work in the world, and to do my part to contribute to healing the world, I need to take care of myself. And she did. She was like, Mike, she was no shade on my workplace. She's like, you're working for a nonprofit. They will burn you out and find someone else. You have got to slow down. I think of, I hear a lot of Dr. B. Do you know Tricia Hersey's work,
Yes.
Rest is Resistance,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's this quote on my desktop right now, if you don't mind. When we begin to tap into the deep vessel of who we truly are, so many things would end about oppression. I believe the powers that be don't want us rested because they know if we rest enough, we're going to figure out what's really happening and overturn the entire system.
Yes.
Exhaustion keeps us numb, keeps us zombie-like, keeps us on their clock. Overworking and the trauma of burnout continues to degrade our divinity. Once we know and remember we're divine, we will not participate and allow anything into our hearts and minds that is not loving and caring. We would treat ourselves and others like the tender, powerful beings we are.
Yeah.
I hear Dr. B in that, because that was one thing she would tell me. And she's like, Mike, when I was the president of a university, I ran myself ragged, and then someone made me realize I was missing my own life. I don't know. Does that resonate at all? That was...
It resonates so deeply. And even both with Dr. B and Trisha's words, I'm thinking about Dr. B's contemplation is both solitary and communal, and that communal, contemplation leads to connection. But I'm thinking about it in terms of Jesus. And I'm thinking about how the wisdom teacher Jesus had a rhythm of being amongst the people, being in the crowd, being, the teacher, but he would go away, right?
Yes.
And the
Yes.
narrative says he would go away to rest, or he would go away
Yes.
to be with his father. So there's this
Yeah.
rhythm of solitary and then communal, and the solitary and the communal, and therein is the connection. Both the connection, one, to ourselves. We have to have these times of solitude that leads to a communing with our own selves, so that we can know ourselves and we can
Yeah.
be aware of ourselves, in order to then again that particularity to the universal.
Yeah.
So that really resonates. And I just think Octavia Rahim is another Black woman like Trisha Hersey that teaches on rest and the power of rest. And part of my whole transformation happened at rest. It was in taking an intentional 30 minutes to lie still in the presence of love. And what happened is in the resting, I was being changed. I didn't realize that the softening was happening and all those things, that iceberg was being melted, right? But that's what happened. And it happened through rest, through just being still and lying in the presence of love. And I remember I used to get mad at myself because I would fall asleep. And then one day Spirit gave me this analogy, and Spirit said to me, Felicia, when you go to the hospital and you are there for surgery, what is the first thing they do? Oh, they put you to sleep. The anesthesiologist comes and put you to sleep so that you can't fight against your own healing process, so that the surgeon can do what the surgeon needs to do. So when you fall asleep, just trust the work of love that's happening within, that maybe there's a process, right, that's happening that you don't need to be fighting against. Trust that. And then years and years later, someone that actually is a trauma-informed therapist said, that often when people have a lot of trauma, they go to sleep. And sleep is the best place for their bodies to process what they're not able to do. And it reminded me of, back in that early stage. And so I think this idea of entering into rest, of really protecting our rest in the face of productivity, one, we start eroding at the base of capitalism that says you are a machine and not a person, right? And
Yes.
or in Cynthia Bourgeau's words, persona, the one through whom the whole resounds. And so I think it's really that. And then also the rest allows me to clear my heart space, my head space, my gut space, so that I can receive. And that's
Yes.
Father Thomas Keating's words stick to me, that
Yes.
receptivity over effort, especially in prayer. And
It's so
so
good.
that's just, rest is
What
receiving.
It's so true. And it's one of the things I love that Trisha Hersey talks about that connects to Dr. B's work is the reclaiming our dream space.
That.
If we can't rest, we're not dreaming. And if we're not dreaming, we're not getting in touch with our deepest self.
Yeah.
And from Dr. B's cosmology, getting in touch with our deepest self, listening to the ancestors, listening to all the downloads that come when we're open. And I've been grateful because she's definitely shown up in my dreams since she passed. I think you too, right? She's around. Something else she taught me that I love is joy as resistance. I love, my favorite podcast episode of all time is when she interviewed Dr. Walter Fluker on her podcast. And this is something that emerged, and it emerges in all her teaching. But to be so joyful in a way that does not ignore suffering, injustice, and the brokenness of the world, but actually hits it head on, feels paradoxical. But she taught me something about joy as resistance. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, it really does. I think it was, I'm confusing books now, but in one of her books, she quotes someone about joy being essentially our authentic self. And which made me think about Thurman and the sound of the genuine. So it's interesting that it was the Dr. Walter Fluker episode that you mentioned. But I think for me, the thing that resonates is that connection to the place inside of me that is full of light, that is full of truth. And happiness seems to be such a state of being a reaction to something.
Yep.
But joy is something that is from within. It's that center. When Howard Thurman talks about how we center down and how there's this inner island, this sea, and in front of that is this flaming sword. And I imagine that the energy of our joy, the radiance of our joy, is there in that inward sea, right?
Yeah.
It's a part of us. And when we are well rested, we can tap into the energy of that joy. And we get to co-create and participate with love in the atmosphere from that place of joy,
Yeah.
And so I can see how they both go together in that way.
I love that so much. And I think about, I love, one of the great things about a good wisdom teacher is they share their teachers with you. So Dr. B gave me Howard Thurman and Tia Bowman and the music of Sweet Honey on the Rock and so many other, Walter Wink, profound teachers. And I would love when she would bring us back to that. I love Howard Thurman says, there is in you something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. And sometimes there's so much traffic going on in your minds, so many different kinds of signals, so many vast impulses floating through your organism that go back thousands of generations, long before you were even a thought in the mind of creation. And you're buffeted by these. And in the midst of all this, you've got to find out what your name is. Who are you? How does the sound of the genuine come through you?
Yes.
And that reminder to rest into receptivity, right?
Yeah.
To hear the sound of the genuine. It's so profound. Something else I loved about Dr. B is that she lived so many lives, right? She'd been, I think, a dancer, an actor,
She
an
was,
academic. Yeah. And she said to me one time, I'll never forget this. She said, life has a rhythm. And sometimes you lose it. And when you realize you've lost the rhythm, all you do is you go back and you find it again.
Yeah. I tell my kids all the time, it's yes until it's no. It's yes until it's no. And once you have the no, it's okay to let that go. And then lean into love, lean into your own intuition and figure out what the next yes is. Listen for the sound of the yes. But it's yes until it's no. And you don't have to stay on the one path, just because you thought this was that thing or whatever. It's just yes until it's no. And when the no is there, you can release that and move to the next thing. And I love that about her. The other thing I love in that, though, is that, yes, she was an attorney. Yes, she was a professional actor. Yes, she was a storyteller, an ethicist, a theologian, a contemplative, a mystic. What I see is not, even as she traversed different paths, it's not a cutting off. It wasn't like, oh, I was this one thing and I'm not, and I don't do that anymore at all. You actually see the
Yeah.
remnants of every life lived, of every path coming together. Because when I read Liberation in the Cosmos, I'm like, oh, this is the thespian. Oh, I get
Yes.
the storyteller here. Here the
Yeah.
actor comes to life, right?
Yeah.
And you can literally hear that part of her journey come to life in the way,
Yeah.
that this is written. And so that gives us back to, Father Richard and how he would always say to include and transcend. But certainly
Yeah.
her capacity to, I don't even know if it's a reinvent, but to just follow the spirit along the paths where the yeses were, and to go where there was space and room and the place for her to be in her existence. And that freedom to try new things and to learn new things and to sit with things and to
Yeah.
consider. That's an amazing opportunity for us all to give ourselves the freedom to not be boxed in. And that's the thing that I love, that I really wanted people to hear so much, because as a Black woman, I love that a lot of Black contemplatives really put her on a kind of pedestal. She
Yeah.
she for us is like, this is a person in our generation and day and age who is all the things that in some ways we want to be, right?
Yeah.
We could see it in her life. And Dr. B was telling us, yes, I can talk about African diaspora, mysticism, and ancestors, and my sacred cosmos includes my ancestors, the Orishas, God, all these things, because that's my context. That's where I come from. But then she would say to you, Mike, what is your origin? Get your DNA tested,
Yeah.
and go back to your indigenous ancestors and learn the shamans in your
Yeah.
path. And so it wasn't just like, I only want to talk to Black people. You kind of
Yeah.
talked about that in your beginning. It was that I can do that because that's who I am. And also, when we all go back to the indigenous origin, to the indigenous shamans, we all have a contemplative origin that exists there. And they're telling it in the songs, in the rituals, and the storytellers, and in the dance. And that's the wisdom that will help free us from some of the confinements of the systems that we have today. So I love that about her.
It's so true, and I so appreciate you sharing that, because when Dr. B talks about the crowded cosmos, it's just not a crowded cosmos out there, right?
Right.
And I know she's telling me that's my words, not hers, but it's still, that's how I experienced her teaching, was this crowded cosmos. It's a crowded cosmos in here,
Yes.
and she would do that. What a gift for her to talk about lost history and lost culture and finding it, right? And then to talk to me as a white man and go, don't settle for being white. That's not good enough. Find your ancestors, find your people. She loved this quote. If we go back far enough, all of us have ancestors that sat around a fire, right?
Yes.
Told stories, looked up at the stars, asked questions. That's everyone. It is a universal inheritance as a human person.
Yes,
And
it is.
she would say this over and over again. And then what's funny is how the synchronicities kick in when you get in that energy. I grew up my entire life being told that I was Irish and Italian, and then a mishmash of European. And I have a friend here in Albuquerque who grew up in Siberia. And one day, not that long ago, she said to me, your last name is Russian. It's very common in Siberia. And I said, oh, you mean Petrovich? Or no, she goes, just Petro. She said, I heard it all the time growing up in Siberia. I took Richard to go to Oprah's not long ago, and we were wheeling him up the ramp at the airport, and some guy walks over to us and asks who we were, and he goes, Petro. Very famous name in Russia. Very famous. It was so funny. And so I finally broke down and got a DNA test. Sure enough, I'm a third Irish, a third Russian, and a third a bunch of other things. Called my dad and was like, did you know we're Russian? He goes, oh yeah, your grandparents were full Russian. They spoke Russian in the home. And I was like, Dad, I'm 47 years old at this point. How do I not know this? I told Dr. B. She thought it was hysterical. Because the other thing that was interesting is, and we'll get into this in a second, Dr. B and I would always talk about shamanism, and she would always talk to me about it, and I go, I want to be respectful. Shamans, not my people. One, everybody has some form of that in their background. Two, the word shaman is a Siberian word.
Wow.
It's literally where my people are from. Who knew, right? So I was like, Dr. B, you're working some magic on me. But what a gift to tell everyone this inheritance is there. We live at a moment in time where you can swab your spit, send it to an organization, and they'll tell you where you're from.
Yeah.
It's powerful, and there's a liberation there in finding out who your people are.
Yeah.
Don't accept the story you've been told. Do some research. Thanks for bringing that
so
up.
much.
It
The
makes
first
me...
time I went to Cameroon, I remember we fly into Douala. I was going to Boya, so it's about a 3-hour bus ride from Douala to Boya town.
Yeah.
And we have to stop and eat. And as I'm driving, I look out the bus window to the right, and I am thrown back into the 70s in Clayton, North Carolina, in my childhood. And I am realizing that my ancestors were stolen from a land, taken to a different land, but their rhythms and their habits and their patterns and their walks and their talks and their ways of being and how they communed and gathered, that did not leave us in the transport through the Middle Passage. And I could have been on any roadside, because in the 70s, Black people still fried chicken and made sandwiches, and you didn't go in restaurants. You, like, if you were traveling, there were literally picnic tables along 95 and 70, and you would stop and eat, and different families would just be together eating on the roadside. And this was happening all up and down Cameroon. And every time I would turn around, it was like seeing a glimpse of myself or a relative in this in this country now. It was so weird to see the connection there. And it's the same thing that I think Dr. B wants everyone to know. Like, when we understand that connection, that we all have a connection that goes beyond just I'm American and the blanket part of what that is, it opens us up to a broader connection, to the mystery, to the universe, to the stars,
Yeah.
to being. And she talked about this, that when we understand that we are a child of the cosmos, our bodies, minds, and soul come into full alignment. And there was something about seeing it, about making that connection, that opened a path in me. And inside of the path of connecting myself to my ancestors, right? And now in our bedroom, I have my altar. My ancestral altar is right there. There's not a day that there's not some type of communication with the ancestors. But inside of that connection, I remembered I'm not only connected to the past, I'm also connected to the future. And I'm connected to everyone else inside of here. But it started with me knowing this connection, and then it opened up. And I think that's what Dr. B was wanting us to really see with that.
It's so true. I remember the day that I told her about it. She said, when you read the DNA test results, did you feel your whole body relax? And I went, I did, actually. It's weird. I didn't know how to say that to anyone, but I did. It's also funny. My favorite part of New Mexico by far is Taos. I love Taos so much. My Siberian friend, I said at one point, what's Siberia like? It's all cold and ice, right? She said, no, that's a myth. It's only icy in the winter. She said, it's exactly like Taos. It looks like Taos. It feels like Taos. She said, the indigenous folks feel like Taos Pueblo. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Yeah, but it's amazing to know that can be available for all of us. We said at the top of the conversation, our healing is not just for us. It's for the generations before us. And I think Dr. B also would say we don't heal alone, because those ancestors are with us. So when we find out who our people are and what our culture is, it helps us know what our healing work is to do, but it also helps us know who's helping us heal.
That's right.
What a gift, right?
Such a gift.
All right, I have to ask you two more things. We have time. First of all, another thing I think Dr. B showed me was a form of resistance and a form of healing was the willingness to get weird. When she built the Cosmic We with Corey Wayne, a good friend of mine, the story goes, she said to Corey, whatever we do, we got to make it weird. And I know Dr. B was on a pedestal for so many people. Dr. B was so academically credible, but she was also credible with lived life. People could feel that. And I felt the tension where I could see people wanted Dr. B to be an activist, or they wanted her to be a theologian, or they wanted her to be a scholar of contemplative practices of the Black church. But they didn't want her to be weird. And she got to this point in her career, she said it with Dr. Fluker in that episode where she's singing free at last. And she's like, I'm free of the academy. No one can tell me I can't be weird anymore. And I think there's such a gift in that. And she started really, really coming out, talking about her Gullah heritage, talking about shamanism, talking about deep mysticism. And I think a lot of people don't realize you can't have the academically credible Dr. B, you can't have the activist or the theologian or the scholar if you don't have the shaman and the mystic. Does that resonate?
Oh, it absolutely. Because that's also where we connected, because I have always been weird. And I draw weird people to me, and I mentor weird people, and I have lived in a world of, in former life when I was a pastor, that I pastored people that, did that. And I knew she could tell that, like, oh, you carry that. And I could tell that, oh, you carry that. And I didn't want anything from her other than just like to know that I could exist in the weird shamanic state. One of the books that she recommended to me another one that really changed my life was Patrice Malidoma Some's, is it Of Wind and Spirit? Yeah.
Of Water and Spirit.
Of Water and
so
Spirit.
Good. So good.
Of Water and Spirit.
Yes.
And now my child, who also carries that kind of medial way in the world, has my book. And but I was like, oh, okay, there's this whole world of people that exist in the world that has this, that have been on the fringes or hiding or being small because they didn't want to be seen as weird, right?
Yeah.
And I love the freedom to just be who you are.
Yeah.
Just be who you are and find your people. Find your people. But there's something Dr. B used to say about shaman, because I kept really hoping, my last podcast with her when I was on the Cosmic Way, I said, Dr. B, are you going to write the book about the shamanic Jesus? And she said, oh, no, I'm leaving that one for the young folks. It's time for you and Donnie to write some books now. My job is done with that. But that really resonated with me, with the idea that Jesus too was a shaman.
Yeah.
And then she would talk about that the shaman work of, healing from the inside, that power. And I think so much about that, Mike, in that part of what we say is weird is just the agency to be our full selves.
Yes. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. I think about, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about to bring the conversation to a close, is Jesus as shaman. First of all, thank you for mentioning Patrice Malidoma Some, because Dr. B told me once, if I could have one book with me always other than the Bible, it would be Of Water and Spirit. And she put that on my radar, and it upended my world, first of all. Second of all, she did one time, moons ago, said, I'm thinking a lot about writing a book about Jesus as shaman. And just like you, I made a decision that every single time I talked to her, I would ask her when that book was coming. And we talked about it till the very end. I did get her to record one talk on it for me, but that was the one that was a game changer when she said, and again, it's not a new idea, but it's a rare idea. Dr. B knew to look for the few people who'd written about it, that there is this pattern that shows up the world over. We call it shaman. Shaman is the Russian version of it. The word came from Siberia, Saman, right? Of the person who, from a very young age, is set aside as having a special vocation in life, who usually suffers a near-death experience or some kind of loss, which they recover from, and then in that are initiated and are taught by the spirits or by other shamans the powers of healing. And they talk to the ancestors, and they talk to the animals, and they help people heal, and they predominantly engage in soul retrieval. When people have lost their soul, they help them find it, right? Jesus, who says, what does it benefit you, the whole world, if you lose your soul? And folks make that about going to heaven or hell, and yet we all know what it feels like to lose your soul. We have people we love who we feel like have lost their soul,
Yeah.
and we want to help them bring it back. So I love this so much.
Yeah.
What if we channel Dr. B? If Christianity is the imitation of Jesus, and if Jesus is properly understood, not just as a shaman, but the vocation that Jesus held was that Jesus was a first century Palestinian shaman. He talked to animals and angels and ancestors. It's all in the Gospels. We're not going beyond the canonical Gospels to establish that. Healed people, raised the dead, passed through life, death, and rebirth himself. What does it mean to practice a Christianity that is shamanic? What do you think?
Ooh, that is powerful. Well, I'm also thinking about her. The actual quote is, she said that shaman is a person who heals from the inside with spiritual power. And so when
Oh,
you
so
talk
good.
about what it means to be a Christian that is shamanic, I'm thinking
Yeah.
about exactly that, right? Like the healing from the inside with spiritual power. And I think, again, so much of what we're trying to do is from the outside in. We're trying to tell people what they should do, what they ought to do. We want to
Yeah.
control or make. And there's a sense of certainty or even rightness that exists in all of that.
Yeah.
And the thing that I see with a shamanic Jesus is not only this power to heal from the inside, but the power of choice. Because love is
Yeah.
not love without choice. And love is not love without relationality, without relationship, right? So it has to be communal, right? It has to be dynamic. It has to be mutual. It has to be self-giving and
Yeah.
other-centered inside of it as well. And but that agency comes from within. And so I think all of the outside things, that I call it the piece of shit theology, the carrot
Yeah.
on the stick, where
Yeah.
you're just chasing
Yeah.
after something, trying to get
Yeah.
better, all of that falls away with a
Yeah.
shamanic Jesus.
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden we're doing this work from the inside. And
Yeah.
he even said in the biblical narrative, clean the inside of the cup, right? Clean the
Yeah.
inside of the cup. So if we
Yeah.
start inside, then the outsides will line up. And that for me, that's something that I teach, is that the truth of our being, and I got this actually from my friend who wrote The Shack, but the truth of our being is wholeness, is when the truth of our being comes into alignment with the way of our being. So the truth of our being is that inside. When we are healed from the inside, that joy, that sound of the genuine begins to shine and radiate. And then our outside, the way of our being, the way we live and move and have our being in the world, that comes into alignment. And that goes back to Dr. B's teaching of, when we understand that we're children of the cosmos, we will come into full alignment, mind, body, and soul. The truth of our being will match the way of our being,
Yeah.
and we will live in the authentic power. That's a shamanic Christianity.
Yeah.
But right now, the power that we have is dressed up and coerced, and it's a whole lot of something, but it's not really love.
Yeah.
And the energy of love is shamanic. It is.
It's so true. And it's going and finding the lost parts of our soul.
Yes.
That's the our souls are so often fragmented and we lose them. Like when you hear the parable of the 99 sheep and the one lost sheep, and the good shepherd goes to find the one sheep that's lost. That's often parts of us. We're looking for the pieces of ourselves that have been lost, and our loved ones.
Yeah.
Helping us find, it's saving people from hell is one thing. Saving souls that have been lost,
Yeah.
saving souls that are in that place where they're saying, "Why so downcast, my soul?"
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
shaman comes looking.
Yeah, that's that dear soul, right, in my book. And I always tell people that heaven and hell are proximities to love. The closer
Oh,
that we are to the energy of love, we have that feeling of shalom, that peace, that
yeah,
sense of heaven, the contentment, right? The,
yeah,
the right way of our thinking and our being coming into alignment. And hell is when we are moved away from love
yeah,
and we find ourselves in a place of torment. So it's not
yeah,
like this physical location, but when we think about love as an energy or force that we are drawn into, that we are a part of, and that sustains us, right? Jim says it protects us from nothing, but it sustains us in all things. And when we have a conscious awareness of that participation, we can live with a sense of contentment that's grounded. But when we don't, that in itself, talk about being afraid of our fear and the stirrings and all the anxiety and all of that, we can know where we are in the rhythm of love by if we're experiencing heaven or if we're experiencing hell. What is that like
Oof,
to experience that?
it's so good. Yeah, and I so appreciate the reminder that heaven and hell are things that are real now. We were talking to Father Richard Roy recently about, he had a stroke, he's getting better. But we're talking about life and death, and I said, what do you think happens after you die? And he's like, I'm not going to answer that question. I was like, okay, fair enough. But he said, the great tragedy is there's so many people waiting to enjoy the divine banquet when they die. And the hell for them is going to be to get there and realize it was here this entire time and they never slowed down to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Take, eat. This is my body.
yeah.
Feast.
Yeah.
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 Come to the banqueting table. Yeah. And
I,
that's what we find in rest also, that place of dreaming, the place of creativity, the place of feasting. All of that comes when we slow down enough to rest.
yes.
We can hear the dinner bell. We can actually
Yes.
hear it.
It's
You
so
know.
good.
Yeah.
It's so good. There's and I love the idea, this is a Christianity that I want to practice. If it's about finding my own lost soul and helping others find theirs, it's a very, very different religion. That shamanistic
Yeah.
Christianity, I like a lot.
Yeah. It's one
There's
I give my
a,
life for. I literally spend most of my days in spiritual direction, reminding people of their own agency, inviting them to rediscover the pieces of their lost soul that they've handed over to someone else. And, Dr. B, in one place, she talked about how when we don't know that, we'll spend our lives on the end of strings that someone else is pulling,
oof,
right?
it's so
And
good.
I will never forget her saying that because it
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh, the people are so good. Like, you should do this. You should do this. Oh, you'd be great at this. And we're just like, it's like the little book, Are You My Mother? And we're chasing, chasing, chasing after something. But when we come to rest and we're able to really understand who we are for ourselves, what our own yes
Mm,
is, and that clear sound,
mm,
there's no string that anyone, there's a freedom from all of those strings because now I'm leaning into, does this align with my yes? Does this move me toward greater freedom?
yeah.
Does it move me toward love? Does it move me toward capacity? Toward,
Yeah.
the healing of all,
Yeah.
right? That's what I
Yes.
can say yes to.
And I love that about the healing of all. There's a story in the Hebrew Bible where Samuel, who's one of the prophets, gets summoned from the underworld to speak to Saul. And in the early church, there was this big cat fight about, well, was it really Samuel's spirit? You could never have a prophet summoned up from the underworld because the underworld is hell. And could there ever be a prophet in the underworld? So Origen at one point was asked what he thought about it. And he said, we're called to the imitation of Christ. Christ ran into hell to rescue others. Therefore, we, like battlefield medics, unafraid, run to wherever anyone is suffering. And so then hell, whatever it is, doesn't become a place we avoid. It becomes a place we invade on behalf of those who are suffering. And that's Bodhisattva Christianity. That's shamanistic Christianity. I'm with you. That's something that's worth giving your life for.
Woo, thank you for sharing that. That was powerful.
Yeah. All right. Last question, and then I'll let you go. You've given me tons of time and been very generous with it. I have tattooed on my arm right here the last words, supposedly, that as Dr. B was in her hospital room in her last hours with her family, the story goes she kept saying over and over again, forgive everyone for everything. Forgive everyone for everything. It's a big note to go out on. How does that hit you as a shamanistic idea, as a Dr. B idea, as a note for her to go out on?
Yeah. The thing that's so crazy with me about that is, so in one of Dr. B's books, and I'm going to get the book wrong, it's either Joy Unspeakable or Race in the Cosmos, she quotes theologian Reinhold Niebuhr. Is that how you say his name?
Mm-hmm.
And in it, he essentially says that love is forgiveness or something like this. But it's a very prescient quote. And the reason why I say that is because I almost think it's Race in the Cosmos, because Dr. B was saying that book for her was when her own story changed, when she became awakened. And so she quoted that theologian as, the love is forgiveness, that's everything. And then the last thing she says on her deathbed is, forgive everyone for everything. And
Mm.
I could not help but think about it like a full circle moment.
Mm.
And I also could not help but think about Jesus on the cross, the wisdom teacher Jesus, when he says to his own Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But how that sits with me, particularly in today's time and everything that we are facing in the world, her words feel like a mantra,
Mm.
and they feel like an invitation. Forgive everyone for everything. I hold no fault against you. And before me, when I hear it, when Donnie told me the story, all I could think about was, I want to be a person that remembers that all are created in the image, that we all have at the center of our being, love is our source, and that we are all there in that inward sea, on that island in the inward sea, holy innocence, right? And that I understand the psychic fixations and the conditionings and all the ice, all the fear of the fear of the fear that causes people to react. And when I look with my eyes full on, that I can look at the contempt and forgive everyone for everything, because I understand that only mercy, only mercy, only love's goodness keeps me from reacting in that same way.
Mm.
But when I forgive, I cut the strings. I essentially take the hook out that is hooking me, not to that person, because we're
Mm.
interconnected, but to the actions, the attachments that get my hand stuck in the
Mm.
fire. Because love is even there trying to burn away the wood, stubble, and hay, right? But if I don't forgive, my hand gets hooked onto those actions and the character
Mm.
defects and all that. And then I get burned in the process.
Yeah.
But when I forgive, I let go and I allow the space for love to do what love does. And there, even inside of what she offered, can I trust love with them the way I trust love with me? Forgive everyone for everything.
Oh my God. That's so good. Can I trust love? I love this invitation to recognize that forgiveness it's not letting the person who does harm off the hook. It's letting
No,
us off the hook. And as Dr. B's leaving, she's like, I'm not staying hooked to any of this. Like,
that's right.
can I
Yes.
trust love? Couldn't go out on a better note than that. Hey, this has been such a gift. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for celebrating our beloved teacher together. And thank you for putting your healing in the service of healing the world. Like, really, goodness gracious, this has been a feast. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and press stop,
All right.
and then hang on for a second. I was gonna make sure it uploads. But if you want to say anything to say goodbye to the listeners,
I do. Thank you, Mike, for having me. It's always great to be in conversation with you. So I greatly appreciate that so much. Thank you for the time today.
oh, so good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Friends, thanks so much for joining us again for this very special episode of The Healer with a Thousand Faces. It was such a gift to get to share these two amazing teachers with you. I know this was a longer one, but there's a lot of wisdom to get through and to digest. I hope that you feel inspired to follow and learn more from Felicia Murrell and my very, very precious teacher, Dr. Barbara Holmes. Big thanks to my friend Ryan Keller, who's helping produce these episodes, to thought partners Caitlin Wallace, Amelia Weeses, Carmen Acevedo Butcher, and others who've been encouraging along the way. And hope that you come on back, because we've got a lot more conversations to share, and I'm so, so excited to share those with you. Hey, I encourage you this week and in this season to pay very, very careful attention to those teachers and mentors and guides, the loved ones and the ancestors who've stepped through the veil who are no longer here, but also very much here. Pay attention in your heart and in your dreams to all the ways they may be whispering wisdom for you, so that you continue with your own wondrous and weird wanderings, and work in the world.